long ago that I was just editing. So Canadian Foreign Policy Hour is a weekly look. I think we're at about 135 or so weeks of sort of analysis and updates and whatnot about Canada's role internationally. And there's a number of developments this week. It looks like Israel is on the cusp of a ground invasion of Lebanon. Of course, they've bombed crazily over the past week. And so we're going to get to that. But a number of developments before that. I saw a story talking about Libya and saying that before in 2010, Libya ranked 53rd on the Human Development Index, and now it's at 92nd. So of course that NATO mission was really a liberation mission. Another story I saw just in a kind of military publication, very dry story, was about the Canadian Defense Attaché, the military's Directorate of Foreign Liaison. And it was basically about all these different positions. It was to a military audience, and all these positions across the world, the Canadian diplomatic outlets, embassies, whatever, internationally, and they can apply to these positions. And they said 46 different offices, defense attaché offices. So the Canadian embassy, obviously in Washington, who have many military people operating there, but all around the world, many of, if not most of Canada's embassies would have these defense attachés, and they do all kinds of things. They liaise with local countries' military. They try to promote Canadian weapons sales, and so just that, we're probably talking about hundreds of Canadians who are Canadian military, who are part of the kind of global diplomatic apparatus that Canada has around the world. It's not an issue that gets much attention, and it's just another part of Canadian militarism and, of course, Canadian diplomacy. Aneda Poilievre, Pierre Poilievre's wife, who's of Venezuelan descent, but I think she immigrated here when she was young or something like that. She put out a video. She was sharing this video. Conservatives stand united with Maria Corina Machado, who's the main right-wing opposition figure in Venezuela, in her courageous fight to free the people of Venezuela from Maduro's tyranny. We believe in liberty, democracy, and the right to live free from oppression. And then there's a video of different Melissa Lantsman, other conservative officials supporting Machado. And the conservatives have kind of taken up the Venezuela issue. And I don't know if that's something that Poilievre's wife is she's ideologically committed, or if Poilievre just sees this as part of a, makes sense from a PR strategy because she's of Venezuelan background. That's not exactly clear to me, but they're continuing the sort of intervention in Venezuela kind of dynamic. Mining Watch published I guess a paper report, Canada's mining footprint in Ecuador, a brief on the impacts of mining as trade negotiations advance. And I haven't actually read it. I just read the summary. And it's about the impact of Canadian mining operations in Ecuador. And there have been conflicts with Canadian mining companies in Ecuador for decades, many examples. And they're basically highlighting that as Canadian government pushes this free trade agreement that includes the investor-state dispute settlement process to further empower mining companies, something that's very controversial in Ecuador because they had outlawed that, and I believe they've changed that. And so just the role of Canadian mining in pushing this trade agreement with Ecuador. In Mali, I was sent an article about how 4 Barrick Gold employees were arrested in Mali for financial crimes. Apparently, they're locals. They work for the mining company, but they're high up in the company. And the stories, haven't looked at it deeply, but I searched quickly, and there's growing conflict with foreign companies. The Malian government last year called for, I think it's 35% of a government stake in foreign operations. I don't know how that actually plays out in practice. You can say 35% ownership, and then there can be the devil can be in the details on that, but is pushing for a greater national role in mining, which is obviously not popular with foreign mining companies, including Canadian ones. And so the point of this story was suggesting that the conflict between Barrick and the government of Mali is increasing. We'll see where that goes. But I think in Burkina Faso as well, you've had this shift to these sort of what seem to be these sort of militarist and nationalist governments in the Sahel region, and they've expelled French troops. They've expelled, but they've also expelled American troops, which is interesting and important. And it seems like they are also pursuing sort of more nationalist resource policies to the chagrin of Canadian mining companies. The Wall Street Journal had a piece about how Canada and Mexico pressed on forced labor imports. And basically, the American government's pressuring Canadian government, Mexican government not to accept imports from Xinjiang, claiming there's Uyghur forced labor in the production, so the U.S. is putting more and more pressure on the Canadian government to adopt these sort of what they call anti-slavery kind of legislation. Now, I think it should tell you all you need to know when it's the American government pushing what, on the surface of it, seems like a progressive idea. Obviously, you don't want products that are being made through slave labor to be coming into Canada, or for that matter, for them to be being produced. Of course, slave labor is a step backwards in the process towards let's call it emancipated equality for working people, or emancipated labor, if you want to call it that. But but now, of course, this dovetails with this U.S. one more way for the U.S. to de-link from China, to demonize China, and now they're putting pressure on Canada and Mexico not to sort of strengthen their legislation around forced labor, products coming from forced labor. The Journal de Montréal published this piece about the Canadian ambassador to China gave a speech at the CORIM, the Montreal Council on Foreign Relations, and apparently Michael Kovrig was at the event, and she didn't announce that, and is this thing of malaise, discomfort with the fact that l'ex-otage Michael Kovrig ignoré lors du discours de l'ambassadrice du Canada, gros malaise. So there's big discomfort, like as if it was a big deal that the Canadian ambassador didn't mention Kovrig. And the presumption here is that she didn't mention, she actually claims she did. People who were there say she didn't. But the presumption, or after the fact when she was sort of challenged on it, the presumption here is that she's not hyping up the continued two Michaels thing, their detention, as sort of the liberals being soft on China. That's kind of the sort of what hovers in the background of this story. And I think it's a little bit just speaks to how kind of intense the media and a big chunk of the establishment are on this China thing, is that if you don't mention somebody who's in the room, it's viewed as this big diplomatic comment, and it's viewed as the liberals being too soft on China, et cetera, et cetera. Sam Cooper, the former Globe, who sees Chinese interference behind everything in Canada, housing to drug market to everything, is pretty much the big hand of the Chinese government or state or whatever. He's doubling down. He's repeating this claim which I think I mentioned it maybe a month ago or something, saw it, that his investigations on foreign interference are being disrupted by foreign interference. And he's claiming that he got some figure that reached out with some spicy details about alleged Chinese interference, that in fact it was some sort of like Chinese mole to make him look bad, and publish untrue information that was then kind of like that discredited him. I of course have no idea if about these details one way or another, but it's no doubt funny that the big foreign interference journalist who had to sort of left Global because he did the whole Han Dong story, which then launched a big lawsuit, almost certainly untrue, and now he's claiming foreign interference is responsible for him publishing obvious lies. The Globe published this piece on the front page titled "Rwanda used child soldiers, UN report says, despite pledge to Canada." And so it confirms a UN report, strengthened what had been reported previously by UN investigators. And they're saying definitively that Rwanda, not just the M23, but Rwanda's forces were using child soldiers in different ways in their invasion of Eastern Congo. And this should be very embarrassing for the Canadian government, because as the Globe Mail points out, this is the Globe's correspondent in South Africa, who I'm just totally blanking on his name right now, who's done very good reporting. He's done very good reporting on Rwanda, and he points out in the story that the Canadian government has allocated $24 million for child soldier projects by the Halifax-based Dallaire Institute, which works closely with the Rwandan military, and Rwanda's its base in Africa. So the Dallaire Institute's got this big operation in Kigali and works closely with the Rwandan military. And of course, the Canadian government back in 2017, 2018, came up with these Vancouver principles around child soldiers. And so as this Globe story points out, which was reported, I don't remember exactly when, but by the Globe, that the bureaucracy, global affairs, highlighted this going back quite a while ago, and that basically they were saying that there's all this evidence that Rwanda is you're using child soldiers. We should be careful about putting more money into these projects, and they were basically superseded by some, the politicians. And so he repeats that in this front page story, which he reported on. I don't know, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, maybe it's a year ago now, even. And so it's clearly very politicized. The Rwandan files politicized. Obviously, you got Dallaire, you have Trudeau with his deep relations with Kagame. I don't know if it's coming right from the PMO's office or what. But the Canadian government is spending a lot of money on combating child soldiers, working with the military that has been confirmed by the UN to be using child soldiers in its illegal, brutal occupation of Eastern Congo. The Globe had a piece about this upcoming conference at the end of the month, or in the next month, the end of October, that the Canadian government's bringing the gathering, Ottawa to host gathering on how to return children POWs to Ukraine. And it's this whole the Ukrainian children that are in Russia. And of course, I'm not in any way arguing for Ukrainian children to be taken to Russia, but they've made this has been the way of the idea that Russia's committing genocide in Ukraine. And honestly, I get the logic of the idea of forced transferring of children as part of a genocidal act, and that can be part of genocide. But in this case, it doesn't make sense to me on the surface of it. Overwhelmingly, I actually believe the Russian framing of this, which is a whole series of things, but there's all kinds of children that got brought to Russia because they have actually had family in Russia. There's all kinds, obviously, in Eastern Ukraine, border regions, all kinds of connections back and forth. Many of their family moved. They went, to Russia. Russia's still the main place Ukrainians have gone to, of course. That's not talked about. That's where the biggest number of Ukrainians have fled into any country. It's to Russia. And I don't believe that there's this sort of like this, I don't know what you call it, this sort of like nefarious, let's wipe out the Ukrainianism of these children as part of this Russian thing. Obviously, a Ukrainian child that gets put into the Russian educational system is going to be, indoctrinated into the nationalist Russian outlook, which is, I don't know much about the Russian educational system, but I just presume that's how it functions, like most countries. But anyways, the Canadian government's going to have that conference, and it's all part of the hyping up of the situation. And just imagine if you would have like applied this kind of stuff to Gaza or to Palestinians, right? You could have like how many conferences the Canadian government could organize dealing with like specific angles of Israel's Holocaust, right? They could just like, one on journalists, one on children that have been killed, one on aid workers have been killed, one on and on and on and on and on, right? And they don't do any of that. They don't even mention it, let alone host conferences. And that's, of course, totally geopolitical. The Canada Files today has a piece by Travis Ross titled "Imperialist Feminism: Canada Funds Compliance from Haitian Human Rights Groups," and it looks at the sort of Canadian funding to NGOs, feminist NGOs in Haiti, and the whole feminist foreign policy, and how it's part of a justificatory process of Canadian imperialism in Haiti. And it goes into some of this background. This is some history, and very important history, in my opinion. I've written about it a lot, and in the past, and specifically this one person, Danielle Magloire, who I've had the opportunity to challenge a few times, and she called me a chimère, which was the supporters of supposedly like a demon supporter of Aristide was. But she was this person who was totally dependent on Canadian government funding, and then she was but she claims to be this sort of leftist, and it really had a big impact on the Quebec left, the whole NGO world here in Quebec. And she was on the Conseil des Sages, which would appoint the post-coup 2004 coup leader of Gérard Latortue, who would lead Haiti. Or at least be the U.S. and Canadians' puppet leading Haiti, and the story kind of brings it up into today and shows how much funding. And I think one of the kind of important points for me reading this thing, and all these Haitian NGOs, feminist NGOs that are still operating decades later, and it's like, the reality is grassroots groups, they often disappear, and they often disappear because there's no money, so there's no ability to pay people to keep going on. And when you see these groups like Info Femme Sofa, these groups that were involved these Haitian groups were involved in the coup, justifying the coup from a sort of left feminist perspective is how they came at it in 2004. They're able to continue on. What they were able, been going on for 30 years or whatever, because they're getting funding. Now, they're not getting funding within Haiti, right? They're getting funding from the outside. And the Canadian government, American government, European governments, the role of that funding in terms of building up a civil society that is either kind of amenable to you, or in some cases right involved in the imperial process, is an important way of influencing a society, particularly a society as impoverished as Haiti. And so the story kind of delves into some of that. I had the opportunity to say hi to, let's see if I can do this. Emmanuel Macron, who of course is the president of um, of where's my problem? So on I don't know what day it was. Friday? Was it Wednesday? Why can't I do this? So that was uh Emmanuel Macron. He was meeting Trudeau in the Old Port, Montreal, and I found out about it very last minute, and fortunately went down there, and he had a plan to walk. He was meeting Legault afterwards, and he was going to walk. They walk like a block from this one venue to the museum, and so he actually was like planning on. So I think what happened actually, they actually sort of announced it in like French networks. So quite a few people down there, like 100 people, kind of milling about, waiting for Macron to do this. And I think they kind of announced it in like some French media kind of world, tried to get the, obviously huge French community in Montreal, and try to get people down, I guess, who were supporters of Macron. Anyways, we found out about it, and I went down, and some other people, half dozen Palestine people, came down, and a very good actually intervention of Palestine. I wasn't really part of that because I decided I was going to challenge him on the debt of independence. Now, what was very happy about in this intervention? So on my TikTok, more than 5.1 million, as of earlier today, it was 5.1 million people had seen this this intervention on Haiti's debt, or the ransom, really. The basically they forced Haiti in 1825 to pay. We don't know exactly how much, but the New York Times did $40 billion in their investigation last year. I think it was $40 billion US. You could, back when Aristide did the math in 2003 and the lead up to 200, they did a big commission and looked at it. They came up to the conclusion it was 21 million something, 21 billion, should I say? And the New York Times thing says it's, obviously there's been inflation since then, but also the New York Times suggested it should be a bit higher. Anyways, we don't know exactly, but depending on how you calculate exactly, huge amount of money. It took Haiti 122 years to pay off. And Macron and Trudeau had talked about Haiti, and that was kind of one of the points that they brought up in the press release and talked about, and they're trying to help Haiti and whatnot. Anyways, it just confirms the value, really, honestly. I mean, I had to hang out down there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, waiting for Macron to leave. At that point, we thought Trudeau was gonna be there. I bumped into Mark Carney. I'm not going to show that. Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada. So I asked him about his position on the Holocaust in Gaza, which was kind of funny. He just dismissed me, refused to talk. And I actually also just so happened when I was just went across the street, and François Legault, the premier of Quebec, was entering the museum where he was going to meet with Macron. So I was able to challenge Legault on Palestine. My intervention wasn't so great, but anyways, he certainly heard the message. And like I said, there was a very good, although actually lots of play in the French media. The Samar, the woman here whose 13-year-old was killed in Gaza, she challenged Macron and a handful of other people, and it got lots of media attention in the French media over his policy on Palestine. So it just shows the value of this stuff. It really it has in the big picture, I mean, it doesn't have much value, but in terms of a political intervention, it is really worthwhile where there's opportunities to confront these politicians and to video it. The amount of undercover security and the amount of like police at this operation was wild. Like I had this guy, yeah, anyways, I'm gonna get into it all, but this undercover who just followed me for like an hour and a half. And when I asked him he was uncover, denied it. And then and then after I yelled at Macron, then he pulls his whole business of like basically driving me away, never admitting that he's undercover. So he's like pushing me, but he's never admitting he's a cop, right? And he's claiming that he's doing it only because I'm like causing a scene, and it's like it's making people uncomfortable. It's like he's acting like he was like a citizen intervention. It was just a totally bizarre experience. And then when I look back on all these other people who were with us, there was a guy with a Bixie bike. Okay, so the Bixies are like the public bikes, and so you have like if you remember, you have to, it's 45 first 45 minutes is free, right? So this guy has a Bixie bike the whole time. I see him around his Bixie bike, and I'm like, well, what, I remember thinking about why hasn't the guy put the Bixie bike back? He wants to wait for Macron, go drop your Bixie bike off, and because there's a Bixie stand just around the corner, but he has his Bixie bike, and then later on, I clue in he's an undercover, and it's part of his like get up is having this Bixie bike, and he uses the Bixie bike later on to basically try to block. I mean, I try to get back to Macron later on. Uses his Bixie bike to block me, all being undercover. Anyways, so it's obviously a huge policing operation. There was snipers everywhere and the like. But back to the Haiti question. So like I said, Trudeau met with Macron on Haiti. Trudeau at the UN this week met with William Ruto, the Kenyan leader, who is and is committed to putting substantially more soldiers. It sounds like now into Haiti. I think it's like 2,500 that Ruto is claiming, and Trudeau. The whole readout between Trudeau and Ruto or Trudeau's side is all about Haiti. So all he's pushing for is more Kenyan involvement in Haiti. Bob Ray recently traveled to Haiti, and he's quoted in one CBC piece about the shocking situation. So they really are hyping up, really pushing for this UN to turn it into UN mission. I believe today, actually, there's going to be some further discussion about it at the UN. And I should say today is the 23rd anniversary of the first coup against Aristide after 7 or 8 months. The first, wildly popular elected president being snuffed out by the military with the backing of certainly the CIA, and I think more kind of quiet backing of the Canadian government. On the Palestine question, on the Lebanon question, honestly, at this point, I mean, who can't see Zionism as just a cancer that needs to be extricated from the region? I mean, it's just unbelievable, right? Bombing Yemen, bombing a whole bunch of terrible bombings in Syria, continue onslaught in Gaza. Some of the reports coming out today, killing journalists again. Kid, horrible story about how the 10 or however old she was dies. She lives and then dies in agony, hours and hours of agony. And then just what I don't know what you call it in Lebanon, but this incinerating 6 or 7 residential buildings, and we don't know how many hundreds are just immediately turned into dust. They're saying 1 million people are already displaced. Saw something. It was something like a quarter of people in Lebanon are like sleeping outside now. So it's unbelievable, and it's probably going to get worse here. If they do go in on the ground, this could go on for a long time, and we could see tens of thousands, not almost certainly thousands, but probably tens of thousands of Lebanese being killed. Hopefully, there will be Hezbollah will be able to kill a decent number of Israeli soldiers. That the ground obviously plays much more to Hezbollah's strength versus the air wars and the drones and all that. So hopefully Israel gets caught, and it's really painful and damaging to Israel. But there's just these fanatics in charge, and they're going to push it, and where they're getting the support. There's a one Knesset member on this video from Netanyahu's Likud. He says, this clip is unbelievable. Watch. Newborn Palestinian babies are terrorists, and the announcer says, like, pushes back on him, and he doubles down, right? It's just unbelievable. The Jerusalem Post publishing this story that Jews are biblically obligated to conquer Lebanon, and so there's all these stories, these images of selling houses in southern Lebanon for Israeli settlers. So the Jerusalem Post pulls the article after a huge kerfuffle online. They end up withdrawing the article. But this is the sort of messianic Zionism that is clearly significant chunks of the Jewish Israeli public hold, and has more and more adherence among the upper echelons of politics and even the military. And so it's and of course they're emboldened, right, by these incredible comments, right? Trudeau, he tweeted out, I spoke with Prime Minister McCarthy about the situation in Lebanon. The people of that's a caretaker head or Prime Minister in Lebanon. The people of Lebanon deserve to live in peace and security, free from conflict and from Hezbollah's Iran-backed terrorism. Not the U.S. Canadian-backed, Israeli, U.S. and Canadian-backed terrorism. It's that free of Hezbollah. This is Trudeau, and he made kind of basically justified the killing of Nasrallah, which again, the estimates we have no idea, but people say 300 people were just wiped out, right, in the blowing up of these 6 or 7 residential towers, and Trudeau basically celebrates it. Before Melanie Joly, we are gravely concerned with escalation between Israel and Hezbollah, a listed terrorist organization. So as if it's not entirely an Israeli escalation, and then to throw in a listed terrorist organization, and it gets you the whole question of, like, I published a piece of basically saying that the Canada's terrorist list, and it basically just repeated something I wrote two and a half years ago. Canada's terrorist list enables terrorism, right? It's a justification for Israeli terrorism. Very clearly, in the case of Lebanon, the pager attacks, the walkie-talkie attacks, and then now these bombings, and on and on and on. And so and if you look at, like, Jean Chrétien met with Nasrallah when Jean Chrétien, Prime Minister, in October 2002, when he was in Beirut, he met Nasrallah. And it was partly after that the Israel lobby, with Erwin Kotler being a central player in this, pushed a real big push to get Hezbollah listed as a terrorist organization in Canada. They hadn't been listed, the political arm. And Hezbollah is a political party. It's a significant political party in Lebanon. So it's being listed, it's been called this terrorist organization, even though it's like 20% of the vote, I think I saw it won. So it's and if Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, what is the Israeli military? What is Likud? As I posted on Trudeau's tweet about the matter, they could be the first additions to Canada's genocidal list, right? The put on the Israeli military and Likud and Canada's genocidal list. So Canada's justifying this horrendous violence, which everything suggests is going to get worse and worse in coming days. So to go through a few other developments on the Palestine front. So we ended off last week with a big debate with Nadia. I'm not sure if Nadia's on this, but around the Amira El-Jawabi's letter to university presidents, and how Quebec Solidaire. So the Quebec National Assembly unanimously endorsed this criticism of this letter. And I went back and I actually looked at the letter. I just had read people's comments on it, and it's a very good letter. I mean, for the establishment kind of whatever. basically it's pushing back against anti-Palestinian racism at universities, and it's pushing back on the Zionist attack, House Fathers attack specifically on universities, and it's saying there should be free speech, protect students' right to demonstrate. Now on Friday, at the big climate demonstration here in Montreal, the head of Quebec Solidaire, Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, who's the most famous student activist in the country, and he was there. So I challenged him. I haven't shared the video yet, but I challenged him on why they endorse this motion. So this party says they support BDS, because they say they support BDS, and they joined in on the conduct, and it's led by this prominent, the spokesperson in the 2012 Quebec student strike, Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois. That's how he becomes well known, and then becomes the head of Quebec Solidaire, left wing party. So the student leader, they condemn this letter defending student activists across the country from this incredible attack against academic freedom from the Anthony Housefather leading it, but it's many different pro-Israel forces, and he had no response, right? He was like, this is an intervention in university affairs. How dare they? But Housefather had sent letters to all the university presidents. Housefather organized the whole commission, a parliamentary commission, to bring the university presidents, mimicking the American one. And now the Quebec, so Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois is going to tell me that this is like we were defending, universities' right to not be interfered in, and education is a Quebec responsibility. And how dare the Islamophobia envoy intervene in Quebec jurisdiction? I mean, it's unbelievable. But it just speaks to, as I made the point last week with Nadia, what's happening is the Islamophobia in Quebec, the nationalist kind of Islamophobia, trumps any sense of internationalism. So you have this Quebec Solidaire who says they support BDS. I think they were considered the first major party in the Americas, maybe, or certainly in North America, to back a BDS resolution. And now they got to the point they're condemning those who say students have the right to campaign against the Holocaust in Gaza. It's pretty embarrassing comment on the state of Quebec nationalism. So the special envoy, supposedly to combat anti-Semitism and promote Holocaust remembrance, Deborah Lyons, she responded to the boycott day of Indigo on last Wednesday, which was very successful. 50 Indigos. Indigo shut down 4 of their stores. There were rallies at 50 different Indigos. Decent one here in Montreal. It got the CBC journalist who'd been in touch around the Hessig Foundation and going back multiple weeks when we had that day of action on September 5th, and we put out the press release, and she started a whole project, did a whole bunch of research on this issue, interviewed people, background, and then the story never appears. And presumably she tried to get it published, but somewhere within the CBC structure blocked it. Anyways, now this next day of action, she used that as a way to get the story out there. So it's a good story, good, breaking into the corporate outlet on this question of the charities, and specifically the Hessig Foundation, and the total scandal of this billionaire power couple, Heather Reisman and Jerry Schwartz, getting taxpayers to subsidize their $200 million donation to the Israeli military. So Deborah Lyons, in response to this, goes and has her people in Ottawa, Toronto, and Winnipeg, I think 3 different locations, go and buy books, go and buy stuff at Indigo, and then post it. And so she's become I used to say she was the special envoy to deflect criticism of Israel. Then I referred to as a special envoy to promote apartheid. That was during the Ern Kotler times. And then when Lyons took over, I referred to as a special envoy to promote genocide, and then the special envoy to promote a Holocaust. And now it's a special envoy to promote the rights of billionaires to have public subsidies to support a foreign military committing a Holocaust without criticism. Right? That's what she is. She's like campaigning, an activist campaigning for Reisman and Schwartz's ability to fund the Israeli military without even criticism. Right? This is what we're paying. This is now, and we're also paying for her, of course. There's our taxpayers paying for this position. It's just outrageous kind of thing. Honestly, hard to believe. This is where things are at. Judy Haven has a very good piece on her blog that I think published today about Jewish day schools. And there's a few things in there that I didn't know. So, for instance, she says that more than 40% of Canadian Jews have attended Jewish day schools. And she says there's it's 74 schools in 8 different cities. And of course, we know that these are basically Zionist indoctrination schools. Probably some of them in the Hasidic community here in Montreal may not be. That may not be the case. I'm not sure, but I think the vast majority are like Israel is at the center, and a whole bunch of them basically seem to promote students joining the Israeli military after graduating. So it's not just like sort of soft Zionism. It's hard line. Basically, what being Jewish is being a promoter or supporter of Israel. That's sort of the main ethos. So she goes through a bunch of stuff in the piece. It's worth checking out. Now we had a positive development today that came to light on the charity question. So the Eminem Foundation has had their charity, has a tax credit, the ability to write tax credits, suspended. So what happened is, the Neiman Foundation, back on August 10th, the CRA revoked the Neiman Foundation. The Neiman Foundation charitable status, principally for supporting the Israeli military, but all kinds of elemental, scandalous paperwork, all kinds of dubious stuff, supporting West Bank settlements. And so what they did, the Neiman Foundation person said, basically, if you want to keep supporting our work, donate to this Eminem. I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Donate to them. Really like bold and honestly stupid move, but this is what a whole bunch of pro-Israel charities have been doing. And I did a big interview with Miles Howe today, who's the person who came up with this concept, him and another academic, this concept of a burner charity. And so basically what they show is that there's these dormant Israel charities that if the CRA revokes one charitable status, the funding then flows to this other dormant charity, and he connects it to basically that these charities are just tools for a handful of like wealthy people to funnel money, but what this development today, and Mark Bloomberg, who's this charity person, this charity accountant lawyer who follows, who's a Zionist, but he's sort of so respects the whole charity world, and he's been critical of the JNF stuff, and he's played a big role with the Canadian Jewish News, and how the Canadian Jewish News has been really kind of embarrassed the JNF and really made the JNF into put JNF into a tough position. And so what he's saying, this is the fastest he's ever seen the CRA act in terms of suspending a charity's ability to provide tax credits. So what we're presuming from this is that the CRA is now, the concept of the burner charity on these Israel charities has entered their thinking, which is great, and that they are following the sector a bit more closely, which I presume comes probably from many different dynamics, but one of them being the campaigning, the different submissions that the Just Peace advocates, Karen Robbins specifically, has been doing on the different charities, and probably also some other more broad, I think I've talked about this in previous ones, but anyways, it's a positive development for sure on the charity question, and having some success in first of all, shutting down more of these Israel charities, but also just putting pressure on them to at minimum start properly accounting for their where their donations are going. So I've gone on a little long here. I'm going to see what I'm going to step through anything. One thing I will I think talk about briefly is it came out that Sarel, which brings volunteers to Israeli military bases. And we did a big thing. Shane Martinez, lawyer, launched most of this, but thing about Sarel violating the Foreign Enlistment Act, and he actually began a private prosecution, which Justice of the Peace said there was enough evidence to hear, and then the Crown intervened and sabotaged it all. So the Sarel is a dubious organization. They bring people to basically volunteer in Israeli military bases. They do all kinds of different stuff. Anyway, so Sarel is doing this recruitment thing at the Jewish Community Center in Ottawa. And Sam Hirsch, who's I know of him through the NDP world, the NDP resolution, and so he pushes the pro-Palestine resolution, NDP. He posts this thing saying, this event being held at the Jewish Community Center in Ottawa seeks to recruit volunteers to work on IDF bases. This needlessly conflates support for Israel and its atrocities with Judaism, the very charge that's rightfully labeled anti-Semitic. It makes us less, not more safe. And I understand this is coming from a opposition to the genocide perspective, but I honestly consider it highly, highly racist and quite honestly Jewish supremacist. If even 1% of your analysis of recruiting at a Jewish community center for a year into the Holocaust, recruiting at a Jewish community center to bring people to support the Israeli military is about how it makes Jews in Ottawa less safe, you're on the wrong track, and you are actually upholding part of the problem. You're upholding this basic supremacy, really, of Jewish life being more important than Palestinian or Arab or life. And it's I get that it's an effort to push back. It's an effort to push back in a sort of like within the Zionist box, but it's not acceptable. And I think people should be quite clear about that. That it's it's all over the discussions about Palestine. And I talked about that piece that Davide Maestrice ran 10 days ago, whatever. Well, Jeremy Appel wrote a counter to the piece about the sort of Jewish community's complicity in Israel's crimes. And he wrote this counter, which when you read the piece, the counter is not like, I don't find anything in and of itself particularly objectionable. I mean, there's a whole bunch that's omitted, but the overarching thing is highly objectionable. And the idea that someone on the left, someone who himself says he went through like a Jewish school, and he went through the whole sort of Zionist indoctrination process, the fact that you would try to push back on a piece that basically was heightening pressure on Jewish organizations who are complicit in the genocide. And if you read Maestrice's piece, it's very, very cautious. I criticize Maestrice for being too cautious, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that he should have been much harder line on. The fact that you would push back on that in this context where there's far, far too limited of an effort at unearthing or honestly, I don't know if the word would be destroying. That comes across too harsh, but that's essentially the point. Like the Jewish schools that Judy Haven wrote about today, we have to have a strategy to just either have them all disappear or radically change. And from my perspective, it's not my interest in they're radically changing. No, my interest in how do you weaken them and ideally, destroy them, right? They are indoctrination grounds they're indoctrinating people to support Israel's apartheid, genocide, Holocaust, to join the Israeli military. And so when someone writes a counter this piece that Maestrice wrote, going into some of this kind of stuff, and has never, from what I can tell, ever delved into how do we undercut the biggest private school in the country, Tannenbaum Chat, that has IDF days. So it's this defensiveness. So if you start exploring and putting pressure on Jewish organizations, Jewish institutions that are enabling these horrors, there's someone like on the left who will call very pro-Palestinian, in many ways that are pro-Palestinian, will like be so adamant to come to the defense rather than what the effort they should be making, which is, hey, dude, you went through this Jewish indoctrination. It should be you that's exposing this and campaigning. And from what I can tell, you've never even once written about these schools and what we should do. What's the strategy to get rid of their charity status? What's the strategy to force a curriculum change? What's the strategy to pressure parents not to send their kids there, et cetera, et cetera? So that's still the state of where we're at, where there's like the concern about Jewish safety is just still so like out of proportion with the reality of what's actually happening, which is obviously the horrors beyond horrors in Israel, in Gaza, in West Bank, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Syria that Israel's committing, but then also the actual reality of Canadian Jewry, right? Jeremy Appel will never, like, while pushing back against challenging Jewish institutions, he'll never actually talk about the socioeconomic status of Canadian Jews, right? Like, if you're going to sort of delve into this issue, do it honestly, do it with some integrity, and say, yeah, well, actually, Canadian Jews are doing pretty well. I mean, like, yes, there is significant hate crimes. There is a clear problem with Jews being far greater victims of hate crimes than almost any other group. But aside from that category, if you look at all the other socioeconomic categories we usually use to identify where people are within equality and whatnot, Canadian Jewish community is doing above average on the other categories. So it's not even rooted in the actual position of Canadian Jewry in Canada. I wanted to touch on a little bit about this, the Grassy Narrows, I think a walk or march. It's just continuing. It's Doug Ford got in on it and called it disgusting. And there's the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation has put up compensation of $10,000 openly. I'm reading compensation of up to $10,000 for information leading to the imposition of disciplinary measures for professional misconduct by the Ontario College of Teachers to any college member relating to the September 18th, 2024 TDSB field trip to Grange Park or for professional misconduct relating to anti-Semitism. So it's basically these teachers who brought students. They put out the forms. It was all above board. It was going to this Indigenous solidarity event against this horrible colonial abuse, and at that there was some pro-Palestinian chants, and then the whole world comes flying down, and it's continuing on, and they're totally bold about it. Fortunately, the union is not buckling, so the provincial government is going to try to do some sort of investigation, and that lawyer, the National Post, the Financial Post lawyer, Levitt, Henry, is it Henry Levitt? Forgetting his first name. He's just a total fanatic Zionist. He's demanding everyone gets fired. He's offering to be pro bono, to even be pro bono to get them all fired. And he says they all can be fired, even if the union contract. Anyways, this is what happens when it's unique, right? This is a unique. The pushback from on the Zionists, it speaks to the power of the organized pro-Israel Jewish community in Toronto, and it speaks to the power of the anti-Semitism stick, right? Those two things together lead to these kind of total meltdowns that you don't see on other, and of course, these other far-right forces that want to go after public schools, they all jump in on it. They love it, right? They really, but at the root of it is the anti-Semitism stick and the pro-Israel Jewish infrastructure, specifically in Toronto. A couple of things. So at Concordia there was a walkout this week, which I didn't go to because I was trying to find François Philippe Champagne. at this event, which I was unsuccessful with, but I was able to interview a couple other people. But there was apparently quite a bit of repression, and we're seeing that just incredible money spent by the university security, the huge security turnout, McGill, Concordia, I think all across the country, and they're repressing. And so last night, I believe it was last night, they some activists they busted up all the windows of the hall building at Concordia. They broke, I don't know, they threw rocks or something like through it. I got sent some of the video of it, and they took ownership of it. So if you're going to repress us, there's been all these student resolutions calling for divestment. You got student body behind it. You're sending security, police. You're oppressing us, and we're going to respond this way. And honestly, I'm not somebody who I think that overwhelmingly fighting the cops is not something we want to do. It doesn't play to our strengths. I don't think busting stuff is usually something we want to do. But I think there is escalations that just take on a natural life. And at some point, if the administrations are going to keep doing this kind of stuff, and I totally understand this is a very tricky PR thing. I think the Palestinian, we had a really honest and serious discussions about this kind of stuff. And how do you do this to not legitimate further repression? And how do you do this stuff that's you know, you got to dance these lines. It really, it's not. I don't know where I stand on. I don't really know, but I'm certainly not going to in any way condemn students doing that as part of this sort of escalation process. I mean, you try all the different democratic means, all the nonviolent means, and it just gets more and more repression, more and more. I certainly wouldn't criticize it, and I wouldn't go so far as saying I feel like in a space of celebrating it, but similarly at a more macro level, all these demonstrations and the Canadian government's continuing, and they're going to go and slaughter, or very likely slaughter thousands, maybe tens of thousands in Lebanon, who knows, where else in the region. I mean, protesters are definitely in their right to escalate to busting windows and stuff like that. I mean, this is do we want this? No. Is this is it going to be good for us? I'm not sure. You can make a PR argument against it for sure. You can also make some PR arguments for it. And then I guess two other things finally on more positive note. Michael Indatier and 7 other former Giller Prize winners wrote a letter calling for the Giller Prize to end the relationship with Scotiabank. So that's a good thing. There's been growing pressure on there. And the Foreign Affairs Committee, with the Liberals okaying it, voted to recognize Palestinian statehood, and is basically begin some process. You can debate the Palestinian statehood, whether that's a good thing or not. Anyways, the point being is it's going in the direction of a further sort of defending Palestinian rights. I'll leave it at that, and if people have comments or questions, go ahead. I will make Laura a co-host. I have done that now, Laura, and yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. So I have my hand up for the question. I just first of all, I just wanted to comment. You're right about the value of the kind of confrontations you do with political leaders. I was amazed on Twitter. Someone else had posted your confrontation with or your questioning of Macron, but they misidentified you as a French activist. So I corrected them in a reply that you were a Canadian activist. And I was amazed by the number of replies I got, because I'm a nobody. Nobody replies to me, but I was amazed by how many people replied to that. So it made me realize how many people were paying attention to your actions. So kudos for that. But I just want to say, I just question all the protests we do. It's always the same, at least here in North Carolina and in Washington when I've been. We go on the weekend, we go to some downtown area where there's usually nobody because our downtown areas are dead on the weekend. We march around by ourselves with no media coverage. And I have to really think that this is just really not useful at all. I mean, it may be reinforcing for us to see people with our values, but I don't think it's helping our cause much. And I'm just wondering, like right now, it feels like we should be doing something big. I was thinking, yeah, I agree. We don't want to fight with the police and smash windows and things, but I really feel like we should have more of an effort to try to shut parts of the government down. Like, I don't know quite how we would do that, but have you ever been engaged in something at a bigger level where you're actually trying to like shut down parts of the government?
Well, I think the most successful stuff on that, in the uprising against on Palestine is the Vancouver. They've been able to in Vancouver shut down the port for I think they did most of one day, but certainly multiple hours. And they did that. I think one time they did it quite successfully, whereas most of the day, and then the second time they did it for a few hours. So that's an example. There was an effort to sort of try that here early morning. And the cops came. Like I didn't end up going. It was before. It's hard for me because I dropped Joshua off at school at 8 o'clock. But the cops came out heavy. What I was told, and I think the ports, the geography in Vancouver is there's a bridge over, and it's on the east side, and it's pretty, I think, amenable to blocking that bridge and the trucks from going in and out. That's essentially what they did, and that's, I don't think that's close to as doable here. I think they've done it on other issues in Vancouver as well. So it's somewhat of a target there. There's been a couple efforts at train. They did one. There was a train one in Vancouver. Then actually, I think I talked about last week. There was they arrested some activists pretty brutally, and there was just a lawsuit launched in Vancouver. The BC Civil Liberties Association, I think, was part of that, and I think that was tied to the train effort. I've been involved in some like office occupations. And these office occupations, we got one time, that was back in like 2012 or 2010, 2008. I don't remember when that, good 10, 15 years ago. We got into this Quebec government office. We got inside and we locked ourselves in these things, and we clearly disrupted the office. I don't think it had much impact on like functioning. And it was really more of a kind of a PR thing. You get some media, and the cops came, and I think we ended up agreeing to unlock ourselves, and then they wouldn't arrest us. They would just like kick us out.
Well, I was thinking at more of a national level, though. I agree that isolated municipal things, probably not so much, but something it just feels like we're something bigger right now. It just, anyway, it's just, I guess we're all trying to figure out what could we do, but
but it gets to the rapport de force, right? Like, that you saw that during the Quebec student strike in 2012. The only other one I've sort of really been kind of closely following with it, really, they had power, right? Like, and they did the port. I know they did the port. They in Montreal, I think at least once. They did the bridges, and then the bridges gets, it's like complicated because it's like not just like business, right? It's like people going to work, and it's like you get quite a bit of backlash in these sort of different ways. And so yeah, I mean, I don't know what that, I would say Montreal, there are lots of people downtown. So when we're marching downtown, like one of the things that you see for all these marches, on these weekend marches, both Saturday and Sunday there's a march. Every weekend they do get seen. The media doesn't cover them, but they do get seen by thousands of people who are out and about. So there's still, I think there is a value there. The question is the rapport de force, and like, how do you get more people, and how do you get people willing to, and the thing that, one of the problems that I think is happening was here in Montreal with some of these actions, is that, so people try to be there's networks of people who get information shared that doesn't go public, and it's very informal. Like, somebody knows, somebody's passing down, they know I'm like, a reliable person, so I get it, and however many other people get it. But when you don't announce things, you're trying to do it so the cops don't find out about it. But then when you do that, you end up in all kinds of problems, because obviously far few people know about it. Then people aren't like always exactly sure about where you're going to. Sometimes they don't tell you exactly where you're going to go. They go meet here, and then we're going to go there. And so the ability, we don't have the organizational structure to pull a lot of that kind of stuff off, right? And and the cops, they'll send if you do announce that you're going to go at the port, and you announce it like a couple weeks in advance, and you try to get 1,000 people in the morning, the cops will send in Montreal. They'll send 1,000 cops, right? They'll up the ante to the point where it's very. I mean, sometimes they'll shut it down themselves. So sometimes you can actually kind of like you can have the objective in some sense fulfilled by the police overreach, but they will do that. So yeah.
That's hard. Okay, Yuri, go ahead.
Well, just in response to what you were saying, Laura, about protesting, the feeling that it's not making an impact. I mean, I know living in Belgium, and I live in the worst part of Belgium. I live in Villers-Ville, where absolutely nothing happens, and but I know I sort of take a much more optimistic note on the mass protest that's been going on for Palestine, because if you look at the liberation of Meng Wanzhou, the freeing of Alex Saab, and even the freeing of Julian Assange, I think there were many, many dark days where many people thought that there was no way the Canadian government was going to release Meng Wanzhou, or that the U.S. government was going to release Alex Saab, or that the British government wasn't going to release Julian Assange. And I think what all of those what all those victories, I think, shows is that even if you think that when you do a live stream and only 30 people show up for it, or when you do a protest and only a small number of people show up for it, as opposed to a London or a New York or a California, I think an impact has been made. So I would say that we need to be much more optimistic about the power we have. And I think Ralph Nader once said that you don't need 1,000 or 1,000,000 people to change the world for a better place. Sometimes there's a very small, determined group of people is enough to change the world for the better. So that's sort of my 2 cents on not feeling self-defeated about protests not working. Although Israel is definitely a huge uphill battle in that respect. But Eve, I also have to say thanks for confronting Macron. I can tell you, living in Belgium, we're nearby France, and getting exposed to French media, even if I'm not fluent in French, I can tell you in France, nobody confronts Macron, at least on his imperialism and on French imperialism. So thanks for confronting Macron on Haiti. And I thought it was interesting that he actually did. I think he actually did want to engage with you, but the security sort of like shoved him along. But we didn't see the video that you of the confrontation. So is there any chance that you can post it?
Oh, you didn't see the video? Oh, yeah, it's on Twitter. It's on all my other, the social. I think I put a Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. Like I said, TikTok is over 5.1 million views. So like I was just went crazy, and it's been picked up in different places. So I think it rattled some stuff in the Haitian world. I think mostly the TikTok's mostly like the Haitian community in the U.S. and elsewhere that got it going. I think they like the idea, of course, of people confronting Macron, but
at the orange and at the orange shirt demonstrations, were any of the indigenous folks or other people also speaking up for Palestine? Because I know many indigenous communities in Canada, the U.S., New Zealand, and Australia, and even the Sami community in Scandinavia have taken part in a lot of Palestine solidarity demonstrations, and also making their voices heard that they stand in solidarity for Palestine. So I'm curious.
I missed the speeches. I got there just as it started marching, and I stayed right till it hit the end point at McGill. So I'm not a huge speech person at rallies. I like marching. I'm less of a speech person. So I don't know. I'd be surprised if they did, because it's a pretty mainstreamy kind of event. People did chant land back, but that's not that controversial at this point in indigenous kind of circles. It didn't have a very militant feel to it. They were kind of somewhere between there was a bit of a I don't know, kind of like dance party kind of feel to it. They kind of some of the stuff. Anyway, but you know, it's now a formal day, right? It's a national holiday, right? The federal government is like approved, right? So it's, you know, it's still good to go, but let's be, you know, clear about where the sort of politics lie of the, yeah.
Okay, we have one last question from Catherine. Go ahead, Catherine.
Thanks.
Ooh.
Well, I don't think I've ever, ever say enough how much I appreciate this foreign policy hour, and your rants, Eve, sometimes has been just what I've needed. And of course everybody else's comments. It's a real boost, and I learned so much too. But I had my own little rant today about Melanie Joly's talk at the UN, in which she, says we can't have war in Lebanon, but goes on to talk about Gaza and go back to talking about the hostages, and not a mention of Palestinians in arbitrary detention, and only about the bombs, like mentions a particular Israeli person who died on October 7th, but just that she was in Israel and heard the bombs in Gaza, and that was, some kind of equivalence, I guess. But so anyway, but I also wanted to mention that it wasn't yesterday, last Sunday on CBC Sunday magazine, Pia Chattopadhyay interviewed somebody about the AI, and then they even did talk about weapons, and even mentioned the Pegasus system, I think, unless I'm confusing it with something else. But it was American, and I can't remember the name of the guest, but she talked about the attacks, the walkie-talkie and pager attacks in Lebanon, and called it an operation. And the guest was talking about it being remarkable and spectacular, and just the same stuff we're hearing from the US and Israel. It was just disgusting.
Yeah.
But it's, shouldn't be surprising on the CBC to hear this, but it just seems like CBC is kind of, there's two streams going on. Like there's one stream of CBC that does seem to be going a little closer to recognizing who the oppressor is in the situation. And there's another side that's really pulling, holding on to that empire logic. But anyway, on that, I just wanted to ask you, even anybody else who had a comment about this, is it feels to me that I know some people have, and you were the first one, Eve, who brought this up about what actually happened on October 7th, and that the part is the big part that it sounds like Israel played in the killings of Palestinians and Israelis that day. But I don't hear it that much from too many, within the Palestine Solidarity movement. I mean, I hear it from some quarters, but it doesn't seem to have taken a prominent place, or as prominent a place as I think it should, because I think that it seems like we're in such a propaganda war, and of course people say it didn't begin on October 7th, and of course that's very true, but conceding and letting the propagandists go on and over and over, talk about the 1,200 Israelis who died at the hands of Hamas, and they repeated and repeated and repeated as justification for what's happened since. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about.
Yeah, well,
issue.
it's certainly personally, it's not something that I devote much attention to, because I try to focus on the Canadian angle of everything. I know Aaron Matze, I saw him posting on X He was on that Pierce Morgan, and he did some post about why I guess on that he talked about how no one was raped. There's no victim that's come forward of being raped, and I guess I don't know what happened. There was some exchange. Piers Morgan freaked out at him. I don't know what but he was kind of explaining why he continues to like emphasize the point that there's been all this effort to find someone either dead or alive that that was the person, that person was raped, and that's never come forward. And he was sort of saying that because it's still used, exactly your point, because it's still used to justify Israel's crimes. So I agree with that. But yeah, it's been done. I mean, it's kind of like, Mondoise, Electronic Intifada, Gray Zone. They did it all quite extensively, I guess, back in November or December, pretty soon after. And then now there's been, there was one just a couple of weeks ago, one of the Australian broadcaster, I think, added some more and, published a big piece and sort of showing, kind of debunking a lot of the lies. And the Israeli press, of course, has reported all over about, now it's gotten all over about how many Israeli, that, they killed, right? The Israeli forces killed lots of people because they just were blowing everything up for their own, they were responding to what Hamas had done, but they did it in a way that was designed to, the Hannibal Directive and all that business. But yeah, I think it's an important point. I don't know. There's so many angles on, and there's like every slaughter, right? Like you just like, this is a new slaughter. Should we be focusing more attention to that slaughter and trying to make more? But then there's a new one that's come up, and then even from the Canadian government standpoint, I see these comments from Canadian officials like I should write a story countering their comment, but then like within 48 hours of some other outrageous comment that is like. And so you try to like pick off, some pieces in this whole huge, just on the Canadian angle side to it, let alone the bigger, so it's all moving very fast, and it's all, so many elements of it are so grim. And yeah, I don't know, what's the exact right strategy and all this stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it, Eve. So thanks very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. See you.
Yeah.